Hello and welcome to another Personal Poems Monday. Today is a special video where I am doing a dedication to the one and only Toni Morrison. So as you can see, my books are pretty stacked. I've read a bunch of her books, including A Mercy, Sula, God Help the Child, The Bluest Eye, Beloved, and Jazz. And so my plan on today's video is to read the foreword to The Bluest Eye. That one is really special, this foreword. And then read a personal writing that I created last night to share with the world. There can't be anyone, I am sure, who doesn't know what it feels like to be disliked, even rejected momentarily, or for sustained periods of time. Perhaps the feeling is merely indifference, mild annoyance, but it may also be hurt. It may even be that some of us know what it is like to be actually hated for things we have no control over and cannot change. When this happens, it is some consolation to know that the dislike or hatred is unjustified, that you don't deserve it. And if you have the emotional strength and or support from family and friends, the damage is reduced or erased. We think of it as the stress, minor or disabling, that is part of life as a human. When I began writing The Bluest Eye, I was interested in something else. Not resistance to the content of others, ways to deflect it, but the far more tragic and disabling consequences of accepting rejection as legitimate, as self-evident. I knew that some victims of powerful self-loathing turn out to be dangerous, violent, reproducing the enemy who has humiliated them over and over. Others surrender their identity, melt into a structure that delivers the strong persona they lack. Most others, however, grow beyond it. But there are some who collapse silently, anonymously, with no voice to express or acknowledge it. They are invisible. The death of self-esteem can occur quickly, easily in children, before their ego has legs, so to speak. Couple the vulnerability of youth with indifferent parents, dismissive adults, and a world which, in its language, laws, and images, reinforces despair, and the journey to destruction is sealed. The project then, for this, my first book, was to enter the life of one least likely to withstand such damaging forces because of youth, gender, and race. Begun as a bleak narrative of psychological murder, the main character could not stand alone since her passivity made her a narrative void. So I invented friends, classmates, who understood, even sympathized with her plight, but had the benefit of supportive parents and a feistiness all their own, yet they were helpless as well. They could not save their friend from the world. She was broke. I had to pause that for a second just because I could definitely identify with what Mrs. Morrison just said. There are very few that understand the plight, as she says, of someone that is of youth and of this gender and of this race. So I'm going to continue. The origin of the novel lay in conversation I had with a childhood friend. We had just started elementary school. She said she wanted blue eyes. I looked around to picture her with them and was violently repelled by what I imagined she would look like if she had her wish. The sorrow in her voice seemed to call for sympathy, and I faked it for her, but astonished by the desecration she proposed, I got mad at her instead. Until that moment I had seen the pretty, the lovely, the nice, the ugly, and although I had certainly used the word beautiful, I had never experienced its shock, the force of which was equaled by the knowledge that no one recognized it, not even or especially the one who possessed it. It must have been more than the fact I was examining the silence of the street in the early afternoon, the light, the atmosphere of confession. In any case, it was the first time I knew beautiful. I had imagined it for myself, beauty was not simply something to behold, it was something one could do. The bluest eye was my effort to say something about that, to say something about why she had not or possibly ever would have the experience of what she possessed, and also why she prayed for so radically an alteration. Implicit in her desire was racial self-loathing. And 20 years later, I was still wondering about how one learns that. Who told her, who made her feel that it was better to be a freak than what she was? Who had looked at her and found her so wanting, so small a weight on the beauty scale? The novel pecks away at the gaze that condemned her. The reclamation of radical racial beauty in the 60s stirred these thoughts, made me think about the necessity for the claim. Why, although reveled by others, could this beauty not be taken for granted within the community? Why did it need wide public articulation to exist? These are not clever questions, but in 1962, when I began this story, and in 1965, when it began to be a book, the answers were not obvious to me as they quickly became and are now. The assertion of racial beauty was not a reaction to the self-mocking, humorous critique of cultural racial foibles common in all groups, but instead the damaging internalization of assumptions of immutable inferiority originating in an outside gaze. I focused therefore on how something as grotesque as the demonization of an entire race could take root inside the most delicate member of society, a child, the most vulnerable member, a female. So that was some of the foreword. And I wanted to end today's Personal Poems Monday with my own writing, dedication to Toni Morrison. So the way to describe Toni Morrison would be the writer version of my grandmother. The words that manifested from Mrs. Morrison's teachers, studies, experiences, and words captured my time and attention for the past few years. The first book I read was Sula. I was captured because for the first time in a fiction world, I was transported and I was shown our reality. By our, I mean the Black experience, which involved deep pain, many uncontrolled circumstances, extremely close bonds to loved ones, tragedies that could have been avoided, the friendships that disappear with the inevitability of time or scandal. Mrs. Morrison's work is timeless. She was a master of every detail, imagery, and making a room for us as a reader to sit and check into until we were finished with our stay and ended the book. Mrs. Morrison's work often left me with a lot of questions and wonder. I think a good storyteller leaves her audience with those aftershocks to make her reader come back or reflect. So losing Mrs. Morrison was like losing one of the greatest Black feminist pioneers of the modern day, to use her major platform. I'm left with a new commitment to take my time to read the latest book I purchased from her, called A Mercy. I'll pull that one out for you real quick. Of course, it's on the bottom of the stack. I will continue to let myself be transported and also share her thoughts through her forewords today. So that is all I have for you today for Personal Poems Monday. Have a great week.